Okay, we're live now.
Okay, thank you. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the June 7th, 2023 Lake Worth Beach Electric Utility Advisory Board meeting. We start with the roll call, please.
Yes. Brian O'Blander,
Here.
Ramsey Stevens,
Here.
Matthew Portilla,
Here.
David Sims,
Here.
and Eric Jeffers.
I'm here.
Thank you.
Hey, for the record, Matthew, I heard your name pronounced the other day as Portilla. Is that the correct pronunciation? I keep on getting it incorrect. I just want to make sure.
I go with either one.
Okay, thank you.
I've been called much worse.
Okay, well, since you did your civic duty last month at the meeting, I'll put the Pledge of Allegiance on to Mr. Stevens, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, wherever you all are, please face either the Capitol or a flag. And I pledge allegiance to the flag
Of the United States of America,
to the
the
republic,
republic which stands
one nation,
One nation,
under God,
under God,
Indivisible.
liberty and
liberty and justice for all.
All right, thank you. Please be seated. All right, anything new to the agenda? Anything deleted? Okay.
No,
Nope. Okay, and no presentations. Is that correct?
no.
Okay. Do we have any public comments today?
No, I have not received any.
Okay. Did anyone have a chance to review the minutes from April 5th?
I have reviewed the minutes.
All right.
And
Do I?
I'm moved to approve.
Okay. Second.
I'll second that.
Okay.
Who's second? I'm sorry.
Oh, that's Eric Jeffers, me.
Thank you so much.
All right. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 All right. I believe that's unanimous. Okay. Seeing there's no unfinished business, we can move on to new business A, Lake Worth Beach solar subscription rate. I didn't see anything in the backup for this particular topic. So, Mr. Liberty, can you enlighten us, please?
Yes, good evening, everybody. And for the record, at Liberty Electric Utility Director, Lake Worth Beach. So what I wanted to do tonight was to introduce the concept of a solar subscription rate, which is something that we had talked about doing as we were putting together our solar portfolio for the city. And now we're nearing the point where we should be talking about it more seriously and actually designing what this program would look like so we can bring it to our city commission for them to make an ultimate policy decision on. So it probably requires some background to level set for everybody on information on just what is it that we've done in terms of solar commitments for the city. So I'll take a few minutes to do a primer or a primer, depending on how you want to pronounce it. So everybody is understanding our situation with solar. So if I may, Chair O'Blander, if you're okay with me proceeding, I'll walk us through some comments and I'll even add some slides as we go. I'll probably do a little screen share in a minute.
Yeah, I believe we're all pretty much on the same page as we'd like to know what where you want this to go in some direction, and then what our role would be into developing it into an actual customer fronting thing.
Mhm.
So please go ahead.
So I think as all of us know, we've made a sizable commitment as a city under long-term power sales contracts, also known as power purchase agreements, to buy solar into our portfolio. And we've contracted under the FMPA, which is the Florida Municipal Power Agency Community Solar Project 2 and 3. We were a part of FMPA Solar 1, although that project was terminated by mutual agreement of the developer and FMPA and would not continue. We took our 10 megawatts that we had intended to buy from FMPA Solar 1, and with the unanimous vote of the City Commission, roll that into our commitment for FMPA Solar 3. So between Solar 2 and Solar 3 with FMPA, we've contracted for approximately 60 megawatts of solar capacity which will represent a little over 30%, let's say probably around 32 to 33% of our portfolio when it's fully online.
Did you say 60 or 16?
60.
Gotcha. Thank you.
And that's split approximately 26.55 megawatts in FMPA Solar 2 and 33.35 megawatts. Those are approximate numbers in FMPA Solar 3. FMPA Solar 2 will begin flowing energy to us December of this year. The first 50% of Solar 2 will begin flowing December of this year. That's the current contractual estimate. And the next 50% of Solar 2 would begin in the November-December timeframe of calendar 24. And then FMPA Solar 3 would begin flowing power to us at the end of 2025, calendar year 2025. So these solar allotments are going to come on in big chunks, and they're rather substantial. And what they will do is they will immediately offset fossil fuel that we would have bought under or fossil fuel based power that we would have bought under our supplemental contracts. So the way that the supplemental contract works is it does exactly what the term says. It supplements what we've otherwise bought under firm contracts. It fills in the gaps between our firm commitments and what we may need in a given day. So they basically fill in the blanks and fill the portfolio every day, every hour, around the clock, 365 days out of the year. What we would like to do, what we envision doing, was, of course, allowing customers to choose. Obviously, you all heard me use a lot of analogies. I'll call it the a la carte menu, where a customer can choose their PCA. So the PCA is where we basically recover our variable fuel costs. So, for example, nuclear is not in the PCA, it's in our base rates. All of our supplemental energy and capacity are in the PCA. And solar will fall into the PCA. The contracted solar will fall in the PCA. The solar that we own as a city, which we actually own, we invested in, that has effectively zero fuel cost. It has $50,000 to $100,000 a year of operating costs, but it sits in our base rates because our primary cost associated with that project is the debt service on the $5+ million investment that was made to build that unit. So the debt service sits in the base rate, not in the PCA. What we'd like to be able to do is give customers the option to select a PCA that is not the standard PCA. So we envision a process by which a customer would elect to switch to some blend of solar in their PCA. And what we need to figure out is what increments of percentages we would offer to customers, anywhere from the base case. And the base case, by the way, I believe would have them at about 35% solar if they do nothing. So if a customer does not do anything, they'd be in the range of 30 to 35%. So let me put up a slide which would help explain that. And let's confirm that I have screen share capability. And make sure I get the right slide. Can everybody see the graph?
Yeah, we can see it.
Yes.
Okay. So what does this graph represent? So the blue line is the percentage of solar that will be in our portfolio as we grow it. And the way to look at the blue line is the blue line was showing our commissioners what our total solar would be if we did anywhere between 0 megawatts on FMPA Solar 3 or 30 megawatts on FMPA Solar 3. The commission subsequently asked us to try to go beyond 30 and grab everything we could. We were able to get to 33.35. I don't know if any of you were at the meeting or followed, but the commission agreed let us go to 33.35. They wanted to go beyond the 30 that we thought we could get, and FMPA allowed us to get to 33.35. So the way to look at that is, if we did solar 2 at 26.55, you can see that at the bottom of the slide, plus our own 1.7, and then we did as much as 30 megawatts under FMPA Solar 3, we would get to 30.9% of our portfolio would be solar. So since we got 33.35, we have not modified this slide, but let's call it roughly 31%, to somewhere between 31 to 35% will be solar. So if a customer elects to do nothing and does not check the I want more solar box, and we'll have to talk about how you folks would like to see that, by default, they're going to get, call it 30 to 35% of their power is going to come from solar. The red line at the top is a total amount of energy that would be coming from a carbon-free resource. So we're putting our nuclear commitment into the carbon-free category. So the 22 megawatts that we get from the St. Lucie project is considered to be carbon-free. So if you were to add the St. Lucie commitment to our FMPA solar commitments of 60 megawatts plus, if you add solar 2 and add solar 3 together, it gets you a little over 60 megawatts. You add our own, or it gets you to 59 and change. You add our own solar field at 1.7, and then add the 22 megawatts of nuclear. By default, our customers are going to be getting power in the range of 64 to 65% from carbon-free resources. And that would happen in calendar year 26, if I remember correctly. So the last tranche of solar comes online at the end of calendar 25. So throughout calendar 26, customer chooses the plain vanilla portfolio is going to have roughly 65% of it from a carbon-free resource, of which a little around 31% would be solar. So does that make sense to everybody?
Okay, so if on the graph I see if we have 0 megawatts, we have 15% solar. Where's the other solar? Is that from the community solar?
No, there's no in-community solar here. So that blue line was referring to our total solar commitment if we did increments of FMPA Solar 3. So the way to look at that is if we did not do Solar 3, and all we had was our own existing landfill solar and FMPA Solar 2, we would have about 15% of our power coming from solar.
Okay, so it comes from solar 2, and the 0 megawatts down here is for solar 3. All right, I kind of see what you mean.
Correct, exactly. Good question. It is a little confusing, but that's a good question. So then what we were showing the commission with this slide was because at the time, they had not yet decided how much solar 3 they wanted, right? We were suggesting, of course, that they at least take 10 because that would fill in the blank for solar 1 that was canceled, and that was at 10. They were willing to go all the way to 30 under FMPA Solar 3 and encouraged us to get more if we could. And we were able to get a little bit more. And we did that. So that's the way to interpret the slide. And you might ask, or you should ask, well, if we're close to 65% carbon free at that point, where is the other? Where's the gap? What else? Where's the rest of it? Well, that's really nighttime energy, which is going to be fossil fuel, right? Because solar doesn't work at night yet. Maybe one day it will, but at the moment it doesn't. With storage, it would, for example. And it also covers the periods of the year when, for example, during the summer months, when our loads get much higher, and we still fill in under a supplemental contract with fossil fuel. So that, if you look at that, you can say, wow, let's call it 65% of our portfolio will be protected from swings in pricing of carbon fuels, which is a pretty good number. So if you're motivated to go green for financial reasons, you can look at that number. If you're motivated to go green because you really want to go green because of the climate benefits, then you can say, wow, we're going to be 65% carbon free in our portfolio going into 2026, which is a pretty good place to be. And we have a goal as set forth by city resolution to be greater than 60% by 2035. So we will be well ahead of that goal that was set by the city commission. And of course,
Director Liberty, I have a question on
Yes.
this graph as well.
mhm.
This comes up with a percentage. As we know, is this based on a kind of a annualized average of how much power we use, or as a city, or I mean, like you said, the PCA, as we have more load, we're going to supplement that with more variable fuel sources. So how do we get to 64.5% on? How do these numbers come up based on how much electricity we're consuming?
I'll give a high level, and then I'll look to Brian King to give a little bit more detail. But what we do is we have a model with 8,760 cells in it, one cell for every hour of the day. And in that model, we begin by inserting our load for each hour of the day based on recent history. And then we add or subtract from that the contractual commitments that we have for power in that hour. And what we do is we take our total load for the year and we escalate it going forward between 0.5 to 0.75%. That's a planning number that we use to estimate energy consumption in the future. Our history shows that we grow anywhere between 1.2 to 1.5% per year in recent years. So some years we've stayed flat, other years we jump up. But if you look at our history over the last 6 to 7 years, we've been growing, well over 1%. For planning purposes, we don't get too greedy. For a long time, the city used 0.5%. Late last fall, we considered moving it to 0.75% growth as an assumption. You don't want to overestimate, because then you wind up getting pretty far over the tip of your skis and then assuming where we'll be. But that's how we build it up. And we then take the expected production of the various assets and spread that out in future years. Now, solar will actually decline slightly in production as you go out in time. Not a huge amount, but 0.1 to 0.3% or so. You'll see some degradation. And we assume a typical nuclear production year for the nuclear component. So it takes into account some low growth on the part of our customer base, which is evidenced by history. And certainly, if you look at the number of projects, residential and commercial housing units or units that are underway or in planning in the city, that 0.75% growth would appear to be a reasonable number. But that's where we get that number from. And I'll let Brian jump in if he's anything to add on that as well.
No, I think you explained it there pretty well. That's exactly how we came up to it. And those are the numbers we used to come up with this projection.
Thank you. Any more questions?
Okay, so basically it's an annualized projection based on the round trip of a day. So if we're using, just to throw a round number, 100 megawatts during the day, the solar might peak up to 30%, and then at night it's going to go to 0, and then you just kind of average that out and come up with these numbers.
Yeah, this is done based on an annual average, so it's taking into account the entire year. Yeah.
Okay, got it.
I have a quick question. So all of our FMPA solar agreements, like, are there's an amount of power we must consume, correct? Like we're obligated to consume it. And I guess I'm just asking, like, is there extra we can do? Like, can we go over that? Is that what we're talking about here? Or Or like, is it all
We're-
fixed in a contract?
We're obligated to take it. I'm not sure we're obligated to consume it, but we are obligated to take it with these agreements.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah,
so
yeah, take it and
Yep.
then resell it or do whatever.
in-
Okay,
in the industry, that's a very good path you're going down because that's important discussion.
it is.
The industry is referred to as a take or pay contract. You're going to take it or you're going to pay for it, but it's yours. So we have contracted to buy this amount of energy from these solar projects over a 20-year period, whether we can use it or not. Now, we, in our very detailed models, if you can just imagine that our load or our requirement as a city is really a sinusoidal wave. It's a sine wave, right? It's lower in the winter months and higher in the summer months, as you would expect, right? It's not the same amount of energy every single month.
Yeah, it's a sinusoid squared even, like it has fluctuations during the day throughout all of that. But yeah, absolutely.
Correct. So in our models, we built the typical ranges that we see in every hour of the day. And then we overlaid that with the amount of energy that we've contracted for. And we were very, very clear with this with the commissioners in one-on-one and certainly at the meeting. And we made it very clear that at these levels of solar, we will have months during the year when we will overproduce, meaning that we will have more megawatts under contract than we have a customer for, even when we take our load growth into account. So even taking customer growth into account, we are going to be in an overbought situation for a number of years.
Got it.
So we've purposely overbought. So the question and the discussion that we had with commissioners, well, what are we going to do with it? Because we've made a commitment to buy it at a very specific price. And what we discussed was that we would then look to sell that power in the market. And we ran models together, particularly the vice mayor was very involved with this, very supportive of this, and actually was almost, pushing us, encouraging us to be very aggressive. He's very supportive. So we bought more energy with the presumption that the amounts that we would not need, that we would sell that in the market, and we modeled what would happen to the market price depending on what natural gas prices were in that particular period. So when you're selling this power in the market, you have to recognize that not every buyer in the Florida market is motivated by our value system, right? So just because, let's use Solar 3, for example, the advertised price that we bought the power at is under $45 a megawatt hour, and I can't disclose the actual number. So let's just say it's $45 a megawatt hour. Just because we bought solar power at $45 a megawatt hour doesn't mean that anybody else is going to want to buy it at $45 a megawatt hour. The market is probably only going to buy it at whatever the market is selling it at that point for plain energy, which may or may not be $45 a megawatt hour. So if natural gas prices are, let's say, north of, let's say, probably $6, there's a good chance we'll get all of our money back. I would say that there's not much chance that we would get zero for our power, our excess power. I think that we'll get at least 50% of that. When you look at the summer months, though, when the sine wave really starts to crest, we won't need to sell any of that power. We're going to need it all for our own customers. So the commissioners were willing to trade off having to have overbought during certain months and have it to sell that power in the wholesale markets at some price that we could get at that time, in exchange for knowing that we're going to be able to use all of the power during the summer months. So that was a part of their calculus, which made a lot of sense. We talked a lot about that. They discussed it at length. And as I said, we ran some models so they could see what the overproduction would look like. So our customers need power. So when you're doing supply side planning, and we did that in the 2018 resource plan, and we did it in the 2022 integrated resource plan, we took into account how much energy customers would need, how much excess we might have for different levels of solar production, and it made a lot of sense. Now, we also believe that at some point in the future, storage will come down in price to the point where we wouldn't need to sell those excess megawatt hours, may not want to sell those excess megawatt hours. We may want to put them in storage during the day and then use them at night. If that makes sense, right? So we wouldn't need to liquidate them in the market at something less than par, or we would put them in the storage. But the storage technology evolution is certainly there technically, but it's not quite there yet in price. But we'll be watching the storage market to see when that inflection point is when storage would make sense.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, understood. And you started to touch on like what I'm really getting at here, which is what is the business case for presenting the end user with an option to, and again, correct me if I'm wrong, but to pay more for green energy? Like what's the business case for that? And it sounds like it's to pay for if we need to sell the power on the market below par. And that's fine. Like, and again, we give people the option to pay more for green energy. Okay.
No,
so what is it? Why are we creating a secondary market here?
No, it will have zero effect on the amount of energy that we have to sell in the market. Because we've already bought all the energy that our customers could need, including customers that are not here yet. Right? So
Okay.
we're strictly asking the customers, how much of what we bought for you, do you want it to be green or not green? So no matter what they choose, the amount that we have to sell in the wholesale markets will not change. We're just asking them what flavor you want it. We've already bought it all. What flavor you want it. And we're going to take it from this melting pot of fossil, nuclear, and solar energy, and we're going to take a piece of that and allocate it to you. But we've already bought it. So
Right. So I guess my question there is like, why not just take that melting pot and give everybody the cheapest bill possible?
the very good question. Part of what we've gotten from the community is that folks want to buy solar. That's what's been stated or alleged, that customers will want this option, that there are customers out there that will want to choose a solar intensive portfolio that's greater than what's already in the premix portfolio you want. So I don't know
at a premium, like at a premium is the subtext there and all of that, right?
Well, that's one of the things that we'd like to get your feedback on. So certainly I can't sell it for less than the public number that we used to state, because I can't disclose the actual numbers, right? The public number is slightly below, the number that we used in commission meetings in public. So
could I interrupt as one of those prospective customers who would be very motivated to, if need be, even pay a premium for my PCA to have a higher percentage of solar as my source fuel? The reason I would want to do that for my family and as a fiduciary for my family, if you will, is only if I am getting the corresponding rate hedge that goes with paying that premium, right? So as we've seen over the last year with the adjustments to the PCA as a result of macro factors that we can't control, right? Had I had a net metered system, or had I had a explicit or implicit equity share of some solar system, be it the FMPA, be it my neighbors, whatever that structure is, if I had to pay a premium to have that, but I would not be exposed to the same volatility that is, of course, part of our basket of fuels, I would have been a very, very happy customer. So that's my 2 cents on who is the customer, what's the business case for our ratepayers who, just like me, I want to go green, and I want to do so in a fiduciarily responsible way for, of course, the utility, but also for my family. And I can very much justify to my family, look, we're getting out of the fossil fuel business with our utility bill, if you will.
Yeah, that's a very
and
that's a very good example, because that we don't know how many customers are out there like Ramsey, but we're led to believe that there are many. But
he touched on something good that I'd love to hear more about, which is I had called it just paying a premium earlier for green energy, but the follow-up to that was, is it a hedge against fossil fuel price? Like how do we anticipate this actually working? Or is that a task for us to figure out?
Well, that's a task for us to figure out and make a recommendation on, but we'll guide you so that your recommendations are somewhat relevant, right? So to give you a rough sense of how this might work, let's assume for the moment that the whole solar portfolio is at $45 a megawatt hour. Let's just make that assumption. Solar 2 is slightly lower in cost than Solar 3, but let's just do the math, assuming everything is at $45 a megawatt hour. And let's assume then that you want that you want to offer a portfolio that's 100% solar. We know that technically that can't be done because we can't make solar for you at night, but let's just use that as an assumption. So your base rate would remain the same as your current base rate. What your base rate would be the same as every other customer's base rate. Your PCA, however, would change to the $45 number plus the variable capacity plus a capacity number, because our capacity is in our PCA. So there's capacity and energy, right? The capacity for us, because we buy capacity under our supplemental contracts, it would probably it remains in the PCA. You would choose that. I don't know what a good number would be, but let's just pick an easy number just for the sake of argument. Let's say 5.5 cents, $55 a megawatt hour. That would be your PCA number. And then you'd have your base rate number. For as long as you're on that PCA, you don't care where fossil prices go, unless they go really low, but you've selected that option. So part of what we have to decide is, do we have a 100% option, which works mathematically, but it doesn't work physically because we didn't make the solar at night. And then how long would customers lock in? So let's say, in Ramsey's example, would Ramsey be allowed to switch every month, price shop every month, which would frankly drive our billing system crazy? Or would he be locked in for 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, forever? I don't advocate forever, but so there should be a limit to how often customers can switch back and forth between one or the other. And should that be at a specific time of the year? So let's say September or October, you make your decision for the next calendar year or something like that. Those rules don't exist, so we need to figure that out. And we also have to build a new billing system, I believe, to be able to do this. I'm told that the existing billing system may be able to do it. I'm not convinced 100%, but we are in the process of getting ready to roll out a new billing system. But that's still, a couple of years away before it's fully functional. And I don't want to wait, a couple of years to roll out a subscription rate. So we need to talk about what percentage of the portfolio. So customer choose as little as 10% or as much as 100%. Do we give them increments, or we just pick a number and say, hey, you could choose 50% or 75% or something like that? And how often can you switch?
To make a good pick, it would really help to know how many people in this, that customers of the utility, or what percentage of them would want to do this, would want to purchase extra solar. Like, is it a teeny bit, a few percent, or is it like 15 or 20? That would help to know when we decide, how long do they have to lock in for? And, is there one time when everybody, makes the agreement, or can they do it on a rolling basis throughout the year? It would be helpful to have some kind of an idea.
We could do a survey, although I don't have a lot of faith in what a survey would tell us. Certainly, if you listen to certain commissioners, it leads you to believe that everybody wants this, right? I'm somewhat skeptical.
No, I don't think everybody's interested in. There's some are,
Right.
some aren't.
Right. I do believe it's the percentage is significant, though. I don't think it's 1 or 2%. I wouldn't be surprised if it's 10 to 20%, which I think 10 to 20% would be significant. I think that commercial businesses might choose it because it could be a part of their branding. So just as Ramsey, talked about not his fiduciary obligation to his family, but it's also, belief system, right? Wanting to be green. I think that businesses could use that to promote that to their customers. I just picked one, for example. I don't know if they would do this now, but I was saying the Gulfstream. I would say, gee, that would be really cool if the Gulfstream Hotel was truly a green hotel and had green power. But I don't know what they'll do. I haven't asked them, but
It's a director. It's a big thing in the brewery world. I can tell you that breweries love to be able to say we are a net zero energy facility, and by extension, you know, your beer was powered by the sun, if you will.
Yep. That's
So we just need 65 megawatts worth of breweries in Lake Worth Beach, and we'll be fine.
exactly. I think that would make a lot of.
And we'd all be very happy too.
Exactly. Yeah. I do. Going back to the figuring out what the percentage is, I will just say, speaking yet again for myself, for me it's simple. It's how much is the premium up front, right? And then, of course, the length I'm locked into also corresponds to how valuable my hedge is, right? But the point being is, if my utility bill is going to go up by 5%, then I'm probably game for, I want 100%. I want as much of it as possible, and I want it for as long as possible. If my utility bill is going up, I mean, you get the logic, right? If it goes up 20%, it goes up 50%, then of course the increment is going to change substantially that I want to buy.
Yeah, we don't
or commit to.
I think, and just thinking out loud as to how something like this could work, we would probably want to ask the customers to make a decision ahead of time and not during the current billing month, right? So that'd be like an extreme. Okay, you can't choose this month what you want. You need to decide ahead of time, because we need time to modify the billing system, make sure that your bill is correct. And keep in mind, I'm going to use another analogy. Let's say this is a big glass jar, and it's got different colored marbles in it. One for nuclear, one for natural gas, and one for solar. And then, you know, I'll use just Ramsey as an example. Ramsey says, no, I want all of those solar marbles. I want a whole bunch of solar marbles for my house. Okay, so now we take those solar marbles and their cost out of the jar, and we move it into the Ramsey jar, right? Everybody else's price now changes because they no longer have those marbles in the residual jar, right? So that price is reset. And then as more people choose the solar option, more of those marbles come out, and everybody else is left with the other marbles. So that,
whereas though right now we melt all the marbles down and then make new marbles and hand out
yes,
equivalent marbles to everybody.
Wait a minute.
Yeah.
It really, for this to make sense, if Ramsey chooses all solar and he's taking all these solar marbles out, there should be more solar marbles put in, right? If there's more demand for.
No, that's already decided until 2026 at least, or 2027.
Because we remember we bought everything we could possibly put in the jar is already been bought.
Right.
Well,
also, Ramsey
that means that if I opt for more solar, then it's going to force somebody to have less solar. So I'm really not, you know.
That's what the director is getting at.
Yes.
It's a difficult billing problem. And also Ramsey, if he has all of the solar marbles, he also has virtual solar marbles, because at night he can't use solar. So there's something else happening. It's probably math in the background that allows him to still have solar. And yeah, I don't know the whole.
But if
I like
Ramsey wants more solar to be green, overall, it's not making anything more green because someone else is going to get less solar.
Right. To go along with that, devil's advocate scenario, if a lot of people opt in to have solar for their PCA, does that in effect make the PCA higher for people who don't have solar now in that mix?
If natural gas prices are high, yes. If natural gas prices are low, no. So look at it this way, the break point, I'm going to use very round numbers, but let's say that the system heat rate is, I'm going to pick a nice easy number of, let's say 9,000 BTUs per kilowatt hour, and gas is at $3. That means that wholesale power is at $27. So $27 at that point is obviously cheaper than $45, right? So at $3 gas, you'd say, I'm better off not buying solar. So you may choose to just say, I'm not going solar. But let's flip it now. Let's say that gas is at $6. Obviously, now you're well above $45. You say, gee, I'm better off on solar. So it all depends on where you believe the fuel markets are going to go. You have to choose. And by the way, this is the way it works in deregulated states. Customers are shopping for power. They don't know where natural gas prices are going to go in the future. And natural gas really sets the marginal rate, right? In those markets. I know Ramsey's familiar with that. So
Yeah, I used
And
to
I
live
and I
in
was one of
Georgia.
those customers.
yeah,
I mean, yeah, and I was one of those customers once with, I think it's Green Mountain Power, right? But in New York City, right?
Yep.
They,
Yes.
and I was a renter who said,
Yep.
"Hey, I'll pay the premium."
but
So
you couldn't switch. Once you were locked in, you couldn't switch. You either took a 1 year, 2 year, 18 month, or 3 month, 3-year deal, something like that, right?
yeah, and I don't recall. I think it was very short. I will tell you that, right? And I didn't continue it because I moved, and it wasn't an issue when I moved. So
Right.
that's what I can leave you with there. I do
Right.
want to go back to this kind of like broader equity issue though, because this is very similar to the issue we have with net metering, right? That there's an argument to be made that net metering is kind of inequitable because if you're wealthy enough to own your home and be able to invest or finance a solar system and we buy power from you, you get all the benefits we're talking about here, right? No matter what, your rate is locked, but there is a cost that goes with that program for the utility to administer it. So what I'm trying to get at here, Director, is the answer to what we're trying to do with the solar subscription to really just treat it as though it's a giant net metered co-op, and then make sure that the corresponding costs for all of our net meter customers, be the direct net meter ones or the ones that are participating in this big net metered co-op, if you will, are all paying an equitable rate or being paid an equitable rate, meaning a true cost rate, the full freight for the privilege of being an investor in the utility's power mix, if you will. That's my question.
Yeah, I haven't done the analysis or thought it through in that way. But my understanding of the interest in the solar subscription rate was that customers would want to subscribe to solar and get solar for their home without having to lay out the capital, the capital outlay to build a system on their home, whether it was $20,000 or $30,000 or whatever. So, for example, a renter who wouldn't have the right to put a system on the landlord's home that they're renting, they could still get solar, don't have to make the investment, or an owner could choose to do that without having to make the investment. So allowed people to choose what they want in their portfolio. And likewise, it would allow customers who don't want any more solar to just stay put. But the feeling was that we as a city, our policymakers, had this fiduciary obligation, which I don't disagree with, to bring as much solar into the portfolio as possible. And we did that.
Right.
question.
And I think that's my point. Like, we're there. And I think the missing link between what's been communicated to people asking for this is that the amount of solar that the entire city of Lake Worth Beach is getting is fixed. It's been decided. It's already there. And instead of creating a secondary market where we open it up to everybody to decide like, oh yeah, like I'm using these virtual solar marbles or whatever, we could instead just say the melting pot's still the melting pot. Now we're this percent solar, and that's the way we keep it. And that seems like the most equitable situation there. Again, it's business as usual. And so it sounds like I'm saying we don't even need to do this, and we should just keep billing the same and blend everything. Because I think that is what I'm saying. But
Mr. Jeffers, can I interrupt you though? Because I agree with you on all of that, except I think you're missing one key assumption, which is that, and
It's
Director,
the hedge.
correct me if I'm wrong here. No, it's not. I'm not talking about the consumer benefit. I'm talking about your core assumption here is that we've bought this much solar. We've bought, thank God, a ton of solar. Thank God someone previously bought a ton of nuclear, right? We got a pretty nice collection of marbles, as we've all discussed tonight. But Director, correct me if I'm wrong. the X factor here are the net metered customers, that we cannot stop more and more people from net metering, right? And every time someone net meters, we're still adding more solar marbles, whether we want them or not. Are we not? Is that correct?
Only to the extent that they make excess solar. If all they do is net to zero for their own load, we don't have that. We took, when we did our forecast for load growth, buried within there is the track record of net meter growth already. So we looked at what our net that we serve has been growing by. So we've already netted out, if you will, some assumption for net metering. We don't have a specific assumption, but what we're saying is if we continue to grow at the rate that we have, recognizing that there's an element of solar net metered already in there, this is where we'll be. So as long as a net metered customer does not overproduce and leave us with a whole bunch more marbles that we don't have a place for. So any overproduction by a net metered customer will have to be liquidated in the wholesale markets for 5 to 6 months of the year. During the summer months, we'll use it, but the rest of the year we're going to be dumping it because we're already going to be. Dumping is not a good example, not a good answer, not a good statement, but we're going to be selling off excess that we've bought ourselves. So we'll just have even more to sell.
And we'd be kind of competing against ourselves in that. Let's say you let me, just for argument's sake here, let's say I was a net metered customer and I had to sell my excess power direct into the market. Let's say I paid the utility some wheeling cost, right? Or, but you get, if I'm having to sell from my net metered system and then the utility is having to sell its utility scale purchases excess power from its purchases into the market at the same time, I'm actually driving down the price as a net metered customer that the utility at large is getting from the solar it's selling into the market as well, right?
In theory, yes. However, legally, you would not be able to sell your power from your rooftop system into the market. The only way you can do that is as a net metered customer to your own host utility. You could not sell it to another utility unless you were qualified as a qualifying facility.
But is that not a business opportunity for the utility? And I just, because I'm wondering if that brings us full circle here. Is there not a world where we just say as the utility, hey, if you want to produce too much power and you want to take the risk on what happens in the secondary market and you pay us a wheeling cost, you pay us a net metered premium management cost. I mean, is there not a business opportunity for the utility in letting people within the city do that? Or
No,
okay, all right.
I don't think there's enough scale and scope there, and legally, and I'm not an expert in this area. I'd have to ask a regulatory attorney. But a net metered system is not a qualifying facility under the Public Utility Regulatory Policy Act of the 1970s, what we call PURPA. So under PURPA, qualifying facilities are wholesale power generating facilities. They would sell in wholesale markets, and they could get a transmission service agreement and have to pay a transmission rate and then go find a buyer for their power. And but net metered facilities are not considered qualifying facilities under PURPA. They're an exemption under state law for, as I understand it, for basically producing power equal to their needs or slightly more. The concept of net really means net to zero, although we do know that some customers, will slightly overproduce. But you basically net to zero, and the utility, in our case, our utility as the host, we pay you out on the marbles that you leave with us. At the end of the year, we pay you our avoided energy rate for the year. That's how it works.
And is that a good business? Is that avoided rate that we pay a good business deal for us? Is it less than what let's say our supplemental contract price would have been for the equivalent amount of power?
We're indifferent let's say us, meaning the utility in the city.
Yes.
We're indifferent. We're paying you what we would have otherwise paid for that power. That's it. So we're indifferent whether it came from you or our wholesale provider, except if our supplemental provider, except of course if you've now sold us more than we needed and we're dumping it in the market. So we have to figure that part of it out. From the standpoint of the customer, I would strongly advise a customer to not build a system that overproduces. Don't do it. I don't think that's a good return on investment.
Right to your liberty.
You-
Speaking of the solar, oh, you have one more thing? Go ahead.
Yeah, I think that if you look at, and I know Ryan, for example, you've installed the system, and maybe others have as well, and that's fine. You get your best return on investment when you're displacing power that you would have otherwise bought at, let's call it 12 cents a kilowatt hour, for argument's sake, right? Our fully loaded residential rate for a customer above 1,000 kilowatt hours is probably around 12 cents a kilowatt hour all in today. So when you're producing power with your own system, you're displacing power that you would have bought at 12 cents a kilowatt hour. Once you start producing more power than you need, it means you get a net positive, you're dumping power to the utility. That incremental megawatt or kilowatt that you dump to the utility, you're only getting the avoided rate. You might get 2 to 3 cents a kilowatt hour. So in other words, the example I gave before, let's say gas was at $3 and the marginal heat rate was 9,000, you'd get 2.7 cents. So once you go beyond your needs, you're now diluting your return on invested capital, right? So you've crested the wave. You're better off staying neutral, at net meter.
Or $35 above zero to match the minimum bill requirements.
Yeah. Good point. Yeah. Mhm. So I'm not trying to dissuade anybody from doing net metering. That's certainly, if you like the returns, and you should certainly, city, the law says you can do it, and go do it. But
Yeah,
it makes sense for your financials, then yeah.
My
And
question,
you think real fast, Mr. Chairman, you think the base bill that we currently have equitably and adequately covers all the other transmission and distribution and utility management costs that correspond to that net metered customer?
I'm not sure I understand the question, because I could say that we know that, and our rates consultant is on the line tonight, that we know that greater than 50% of our customers, or approximately 50% of our customers, are receiving service below the cost of service. So that means that 13 to 14,000 customers are receiving service at or below the cost of service.
No, I meant the minimum bill that the net metered customers have to pay no matter what. Don't they have to? Because because this is all about fuel, right? We're talking about just swapping out the fuel side of it.
Yeah.
I'm talking about
Approximately 8%, rough numbers from the last cost of service study, about 8% of our customers are receiving a minimum bill. That doesn't mean that 8% are net metering, by the way. About 8% are receiving a minimum bill. However, we do know that the minimum bill is well below our cost of service. Just to have the system available, provide the debt service, have the crew standing by, maintain the equipment, is much more than the $35 number. And I'd look to Craig to give us the actual number, but I believe it's somewhat higher than 35. So at minimum bill is still well below the cost of service.
Right. In the cost service, we said, I think it was around $70 for the average customer was what the true minimum bill should be. But we can't, we're moving toward that, but that would be awfully, hard for a lot of people to sell.
Well, Ryan,
I just want to add that's
Yeah.
fantastic. That's what a municipal utility should do. It's great. Citizens love it.
Ryan, I don't mean to put you on the spot, but if you had to pay $70 as a net metered, if you had to add an additional $35 to your utility bill a year, does it really adversely affect your current system's economics? Does that really set you back?
It's per month, Randy.
Per month, yeah.
Oh yeah, sorry. Yikes.
Yeah, per month.
Okay.
Yeah, so that definitely
yes, it does.
It does throw off your payback period projections. I don't think we have any grandfathering in clauses about changing because when it went from no minimum bill to having a minimum bill to a higher minimum bill, there were no grandfather clauses that says your rate structure is going to remain the same when you installed your system, right? And that kind of, from a consumer's point of view, you kind of project all these finances out into the future, and then as they change, like it just kind of throws a curveball, because now your payback period, instead of being, I don't know, let's say 8 to 10 years, is now looking more like 15 to 20, or even beyond the life of your your panels, right?
Yeah.
So,
And just to be clear in this discussion, I mean, we're talking about the minimum bill, Ramsey, because you opened that door, but that's not a part of the the subscription rate. I mean, it's a good discussion to have for people to understand it, but I'm certainly not advocating in this meeting a change in that policy.
Director, what I'm getting at is that if we are all coming to the conclusion that it's a fixed number of marbles, right? And if we start moving marbles around, there's an equity issue, right? Unless we make it very clear that if you pay, like if my family wants to pay for a whole bunch of solar marbles, then we have to pay the financial cost that goes with taking those marbles away from everyone else to everyone else, right? And I would be okay with doing that because I would actually know that at the end of the day, we should be netting out in the same place we would at a citywide level in terms of our decarbonization, and we should be netting out at a citywide level in terms of each ratepayer's equitable financial position, if you will.
So if I follow that through, just make sure I understand it. And this is brainstorming. So we're not locking anybody into the statements here. So I want people to be able to speak freely and test their ideas in this group, right? So if I follow that, are we saying, or are you suggesting then that those marbles would be sold to you at a premium above what the city paid for them? Is that what you're thinking?
Yeah, and then the corresponding premium that I'm paying would have to, I think, go directly to the PCA. Well, it'd have to go to your new rate stabilization fund, right? It'd have to go to something that offsets the corresponding increase in fuel volatility at a minimum that goes into the base PCA, if you will, the PCA fuel.
Yeah. So I'll help you refine. I think it would just go into the PCA. So all these transactions will go into and out of the PCA. And then the commission would decide quarterly or annually how much of the total dollars in the PCA they want to move into a stabilization fund. So it gets blended in. So basically you would pay some premium. Let's say instead of 4.5, I don't know, you pay 6 cents, because there's a capacity number in there too, right? So, and then that 6 cents goes into the PCA, and then the PCA has an expense, and then the net stays in the PCA. And if that net grows to be big enough over time, the commission could say, oh, let's move it into the stabilization fund, or let's lower the PCA because we have enough money in the stabilization fund, depending on where we are at that time, right? But I think, what would your thoughts be on how often you would make this selection? So at one extreme, it would be monthly, which I don't advocate. Would you see this being something you would make annually?
I was thinking 6 months minimum, like maybe 3 to 6 months minimum for people to pick how much solar.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I would say annually if we were to do it. That would make the most sense, because if you do monthly, then you have the marble problem of you have to run arbitrage unless you're going to change people's bills depending on how soon they pay it, and that just can't work. So annually at minimum, but also again, my strong opinion on this is just keep the melting pot and let's just not do this.
And Mr. Jeffers, that's also mine at the moment as well. I want to dovetail that.
So I actually have a question. I want to kind of game this out. Let's say we just for argument's sake, we go with the year, and our model is you can buy blocks a month, and let's say I've allocated 1,000 kilowatt hours a month, and that's basically how much I use every month. And I pick 1,000 kilowatt hours for every month for 2024. And it seems to me that if I don't go over 1,000, my bill would be exactly the same. Or if I come right up to 1,000, my bill would be exactly the same month after month after month if I make that allocation. And if gas prices go to $10 or $12, I forget what quantity you were talking about, Director Liberty, but all of that burden, if I'm at if I use 1,200, then the 200 above would be on that higher rate, but everything would be stabilized if we kind of figure out a model that way. Is that correct?
And the block, so let's say you took a block of 1,000 kilowatt hours a month of solar.
Correct.
And you took it at whatever the solar number is, let's say
Correct.
I don't know, that's 6 cents. And then whether you use it all or not, you're gonna pay 6 cents times 1,000, which would be $60. So you're gonna pay $60 for a PCA, whether you use it or you don't. Of course, if you use more than 1,000, you'd have to, you would then get an incremental price for anything above that block.
Correct.
At the regular piece. I mean, that's an interesting concept. I don't know. I'm not sure that our billing system as it exists today will do that.
I mean,
system might, but that's
to me, the solar is relatively fixed cost. And if we're going through this route, I mean, to me, it would be allocating a number in kilowatt hours, because you want to have that stabilization throughout. So next month, like you said, $60, let's just use that as a number. And I use 800, I'm still paying $60. And if I use 1,000, I'm still paying $60. If I use 1,000 the following month and natural gas spikes up, I'm still paying that $60. To me, that is the way that makes the most financial sense for me picking options on solar. And that's, yeah.
I have a retort to that, which is that's kind of how a lot of utilities used to run before, like, we could have all these internet connected meters and everything. And utilities chose to install internet connected meters to get actual usage, because that sort of billing just doesn't really work that well. You're talking like averages where they come out and they do a read, or they actually look at how much you've used versus how much you've.
No, I'm saying, where I'm not talking about net metering. I'm talking about,
It's not not net metering, but like paying an average per month where your bill is consistent and flat, but your usage, of course, varies, and that just hasn't historically worked.
No, no, Eric, you're referring to budget billing. And
Is that not this, but just with a different flavor?
no, because under budget billing, there's an annual true up of your unders and overs.
Mhm.
And I think what Matt is suggesting would be you buy a block for the month. It's like buying a train ticket. You buy a monthly pass. You want to ride 10 times or 50 times. That's your pass, right?
Well, it's more like a cell phone bill plan rather than what we currently have in electricity. And to me, it allows it's super stable for me as a customer, and as a utility, you can project out if I'm buying 1,000 a month for the next year, the utility can kind of use those hard numbers, and we're not doing any guessing. I mean, obviously the exact usage that I'll be picking up will be an estimation and projections, but how much I'm getting is actually already allocated in much the same way a utility buys electricity, though.
That clearly wouldn't work for a year, though. Like, you couldn't have 1,000 kilowatt hours for the same 12 months. The sinusoid that we've talked about earlier, like, I personally use probably double the electricity in August as I do in February. That's just, because air conditioning, that's just the way Florida works.
Matt, your model sounds kind of like what I was reading about, and if anyone is familiar with this program, FPL Solar Together, it kind of sounds like that's what they do, is where you can buy blocks of kilowatts.
Well, I mean, to me, it's the closest analogy to actually putting on a net metering system. I mean, you're kind of guessing on how much you're producing, but if you have a 10 kilowatt system on a sunny day, on a hot day, you're probably meeting whatever your demand is for that, that day, and producing 10 kilowatts, for, I don't know, 4 or 5 hours of the day. And then, you can kind of project out that how much it is. And if you want to, on your end as a customer, to crank up your AC during those 4 hours, it's just a stabilization. You understand exactly how much you're getting and how much you're allowed for. It doesn't, if it's all solar, how does it hurt? And to me, I can go, if I'm getting an electric car and I know I drive this much, I can budget that in there too. And that should be all solar. And I could say, hey, I am running this car on solar. I'm purchasing this many kilowatts of solar, and we're kind of fixed at that level. So
I mean, can I jump in here again? Because I really want this as a customer, right? I really want a solution to be able to lock in my rates, to have a solar PCA as much as possible, and have what I think are the economic benefits that our net metered customers have that the rest of us who aren't net metered and can't net metered don't, right? Which I think the intention of this subscription is to solve that inequity. But what I'm hearing very clearly here is, Director, you all have done a fantastic job of frankly getting us a really, really nice a jar of marbles, right? It's probably the nicest jar of marbles in the state of Florida at this point, in some key ways, right? If not in totality. So if we offer a subscription, on some level, we are moving the marbles around without adding in any better marbles. So where I'm coming to, and don't shoot, I beg of you not to shoot me for saying this, but would it not just be easier to, you all continue to do what you're doing, which is doing the most competitive purchases possible for us in terms of our overall mix, cost versus volatility, all the above, and then offer like a virtual net metering program with all the necessary premia that would go with that, and just say, look, if you as a ratepayer really, really want to get out of our PCA, we think we've got a good PCA, but if you want to get a PCA and you can figure out some system to buy into, we'll virtually net meter you at this rate. Is that, and because then you solve the marble problem. I hope that's what I'm saying here.
Number one, I think it would be helpful if you explain to the group what you mean by virtual net metering, and then we need to understand whether that's actually legal in Florida. So,
okay.
So explain for the group what virtual net metering is so we can have everybody on the same page.
Right. So what I mean in the most layman's terms, and I putting all the legal component to the side for a moment, it would just mean I can't afford, or I practically can't put solar on my roof. But if my neighbor or a brewery downtown wants to put solar on, they would have the ability to come to me and say, Ramsey, do you want to buy some of the power from this system, or do you want to co-invest in the system with me? And there's a lot of flavors to how that could look. But the easiest way to just think of it is that everyone in the city would have the option, as long as they could identify a system that was net metered, they would have the right to either own some of that system that would be the easiest way to think of it. Just that you could own a solar system that's not on your roof. That's the easiest.
What happens if you move out of the system the system tomorrow? I mean, that I don't really see that as feasible unless you literally, both you and your neighbor have a net metered system. You go, we want to go to 1 meter or whatever it is. I don't even understand how that would work.
Well, again,
go ahead. Right.
This all sounds like what I was reading on FPL Solar Together program. It's like a utility-based pseudo community solar program where you kind of invest over time, as if you bought panels, but you don't actually have any on your roof. It could be for renters, businesses, homeowners. But there's a whole complex fee structure around that, I'm sure. A fixed monthly cost, and you're basically taking marbles out of the jar for yourself, like in that scenario. And the original ask from this group was only to be in terms of PCA. So, Director Liberty, can you explain how FPL Solar Together is not like this PCA requirement that you were pitching?
I'm not familiar with their program, so I can't explain it. But I was going to look to Craig and say, Craig, as Ramsey described virtual net metering, is that strike you as something that's even possible in Florida?
Well, I think you can accomplish something similar. I know, very familiar in Tallahassee, they've been doing this for a while. They have about 100 megawatts of solar on site. And for one thing we haven't mentioned is you limit the amount of solar that customers can have. So I think it's, 10 or 20% of their system. You could go probably like 30% of your kilowatt hours could be subscribed as solar. So you couldn't do the whole thing because, you know, if everybody did it, then that wouldn't work. So one, limit the number, and then, you know, first come, first serve. In Tallahassee, a lot of residential customers did it. FSU took all they could get. So it was fully subscribed pretty much right away. The other thing is they could lock in for, I think, 20 years, the fixed rate. And the fixed rate was higher than current PCA, but people were like making a hedge. So I don't know if you want to lock it in that far, but you know, I think OUC also, you can lock it in for a long time. So both OUC and Tallahassee, it's on both of their websites, pretty much detail on how they do it. And it does, you know, you are investing, you are paying, you know, what Lake Worth Beach has paid for solar, plus maybe a premium. And you don't have to put panels on your roof. So, you know, two things, you have to limit the amount. You can't, not everybody can get 100% solar. The other thing is, do you want to lock it in for a long period? And that provides a hedge. Maybe you're paying more now, but over time you pay less. And the other thing is you can get out of it, opt out, but only one time. You can't go in and out every I think in Tallahassee it's only one time. If you decide you don't want it, you're out for good.
So interesting concept then. In FMPA Solar 2, that price will escalate at 2% per year under the contract. FMPA Solar 3 is flat for the 20-year contract. So it's an interesting concept. Our costs for solar aren't going to change over that 20-year period. So I guess I would be okay with a customer locking in for that rate for a long period of time. I do agree that you can't sell more than you bought, right? And I don't remember off the top of my head the actual kilowatt hours that we bought or megawatt hours. Maybe Brian knows those, but I haven't memorized those. But it's in a range of, it's around 100,000, 80 to 100,000 megawatt hours per year that we bought in solar. Is that correct, Brian? We may have lost Brian, or he's on mute.
No, I was looking it up right now. It is solar. Solar 2 is 71,509 megawatt hours, or 71,509 megawatts a year.
It's solar 2, and then solar 3 is that plus, right? Probably another 80,000.
Right, solar 3, that was for 26.55, and then solar 3, yeah, that's got to be, I don't have the numbers for solar 3, but yeah, it's in excess of the 71,000.
Right.
That's for sure.
So we couldn't, the logic is we couldn't sell more than we bought. But I think it does, that just, I hadn't thought that customers would want to commit for 20 years, but as I think it through, I said, gee, why not? If you're willing to sign it and you've signed up for it, but once you exit, you can't go back in. So what you want to avoid is people price shopping, you know, bopping back and forth. It sounds like in Tallahassee, there were plenty of people waiting. So if you don't want your spot, we'll give it to somebody else who will take it, right?
Right.
I kind of like the idea of an annual choice. So for example, we need time, you know, certainly with an existing billing system, we would like to see people sign up, let's say, pick a number by November 1, you sign up for what you want the following 12 months, and then you're locked in for that 12 months. Or you could lock in for, you know, multiple years. I haven't thought about that, but we could do that. I'm just thinking out loud. I think we could do that. But the other then you could decide as you get to November of the following year, are you going to lock in it for another year? But what we don't want people doing is saying in July, oh, I really don't like the solar number. It turns out gas prices are down to $2. I could buy that power for half of that. Forget green. I'm going to go pay half. No, now we're juggling customers back and forth. I think it's neater if you just stay on for the full year. But I don't know the flexibility of a billing system that we don't yet have.
And so if we stay on it for a full year, though, there's, by nature of the equation, there's going to be extra money floating around. What's the plan for that?
that would go into the PCA. In my thinking, these are all PCA transactions. So,
Okay, so that would go into the power PCA like stabilization fund.
well, the amount of money that goes into the stabilization fund is excess PCA dollars. So for example, if over the course of the year we spend, pick an easy number, $15 million in PCA expenses, and we recover $15 million from the customers, the PCA is at zero, right? It nets to zero. But let's say,
Of
for
course.
example, we recovered $18 million from customers on the PCA, and we had $15 million in expenses. That means that we're $3 million to the good. The commission would then make a decision that they put the $3 million into a stabilization fund, or lower the PCA to basically take the $3 million and give it back to customers in lower rates in the PCA. Now, if the stabilization fund is full, the current thinking is that they would not just continue to grow it, that they would say, okay, once the stabilization fund is full, lower the rates, don't keep collecting money.
Okay.
So I think the important thing is to say it would go in and out of the PCA, and then at the end of the quarter or a year or periodically, as the policymakers choose, they would decide what to do. We were over collected. It could also be a situation where we're under collected, where we collected 15 million but incurred 18 million in expenses, so we could be $3 million short. In that particular case, then the commissioners would decide whether to take some money out of the PCA stabilization fund and not raise rates right away and hope for the market to turn around.
Right. But this suggestion wouldn't make that situation any worse. It would only, it feels like if we split this out into the solar option, the surplus could only go up. It couldn't go down, given that solar cost is fixed and the gas cost is the one that's variable.
Right. So recently, gas price, obviously last year, gas prices spiked on us, and we've all talked about that a lot. We were seeing prices of $13 to $15 delivered into the market. Recently, gas prices have been down in the low to mid twos, right, Brian?
Hell yeah.
Yeah, that's correct. You're averaging, this month is averaging 220 or so. Today's gas was 240, but the monthly average is like 220, 225.
Right. So under that example where I gave with the market heat rate was 9,000, the true number is a little bit lower than that, but let's say 9,000 at $2 gas, that's $1.80, $1.80 a megawatt. So that's 1.8 cents. That's certainly cheaper than solar. So we wouldn't want customers bouncing back and forth and upsetting moving marbles back and forth. So now a billing system may.
Right. And I guess my only point here is just like the bouncing back and forth. If you want to reduce that and you take reducing it to its logical end, you end up back at the melting pot. And that's where you go. And again, I think everybody on this call knows that is my strong opinion. We should just stick with the melting pot and give everybody in Lake Worth the best rate possible with what we purchase. But yeah, I'm going to keep saying that.
Could you Mr. Liberty, I know you've talked about the agreement before. This solar agreement, is this the agreement we made to purchase solar? Is this a minimum amount? Is the agreement a commitment for a minimum?
Yes.
Or is that it?
No, it's a commitment for a minimum.
So that means, is it possible for us to purchase more? Like if we go to FMPA and say, hey, we have a demand for more solar than we agreed. Can we purchase more, or are we at a limit on how much solar we can get?
We're at a limit. So let me explain it this way. The solar fields are approximately 74.5 megawatts in size.
Yes.
So let's just take solar 2, for example. We took a 26.55 megawatt slice. That slice is equal to 17 point. Now let me do the math. It's equal to a 35% slice, 35.4% slice of the project. The developers give a minimum production guarantee. So, and they have penalties if they don't meet that production guarantee. So they're guaranteeing that the solar field will produce a certain amount of megawatt hours per year. And 35.44% of those will be ours. Most developers, and I've never met one that did not do this, they all beat their production guarantees. Generally speaking, it's very rare that they'll miss a production guarantee unless it was a really crazy cloudy year, or they had huge problems with their equipment, but generally they beat the production guarantee. So they tend to put their thumb on the scale and commit to, let's say, maybe 5% less, maybe 10%, maybe 5% is probably a good number, 3 to 5% less than they believe the system will actually do to give themselves a little cushion, so they don't pay a penalty. But we're effectively getting out of Solar 2, 35.4% of the production of that field, and in the case of Solar 3, 44.5%. 44.526%. So we're getting a percentage of production which is guaranteed to be a minimum of a certain number of kilowatt hours, but certainly could be more if the system overproduces. And historically, systems generally overproduce.
Well, if they overproduced, could we buy more than what we're committed?
No, we're obligated to take it.
No, but could we buy more than what we're obligated to take if it produces extra?
No. So look at it this way.
We're obligated to take everything else that we've already bought as well, and that adds to our total, and that's the problem here.
Exactly. So let's say let's say the null is 100%. So let's say the system, let's pick a nice easy number. Let's say the minimum production is 100. Just to pick nice round numbers. And that year, the system happens to produce 105. Well, we're required to take the 105. If it produces 95, we're required to take the 95, but the developer is going to pay damages for being 5 short. So we're entitled to, let's say Solar 3, 44.52% of the production of that plant is ours at that price, at that $45 number.
44.5% of whatever it produces.
Correct. So I know we talk about megawatts of capacity that we signed on for, but we've really contracted for megawatt hours. So we're entitled to get all of the megawatt hours that our share produces. Now, you bring up a good point, though. There may be other municipalities in the project that at some point may not want all of those. They may not feel comfortable with the overproduction. So we may be able to buy more shares from somebody else. Or on the flip side, we already know that we're going to be looking to sell some of our megawatt hours, not our allotment in the project, but think of these as they're going to be sending us more marbles than we know what to do with. We're going to sell off some of our marbles, but we're not selling our production rights to the marbles that we have in the project, right? So we're going to sell excess marbles. There may be other people that want to sell excess marbles to us during the summertime. I doubt it, but that's certainly possible.
I'm just trying to figure out what kind of a difference it would make if customers ask to purchase more of their energy as solar. Would they be able to get these extra? Would it make a difference? That's what I'm trying to figure out. Would it make a difference?
No, not unless we run out of marbles right. So we can only sell the solar marbles until we don't have any more solar marbles. And I can't fill any more because I can't fit them in. They don't fit. The size of the jar, I've reshuffled the marbles, but the size of the jar is fixed. So let's just say, for argument's sake, that all the solar marbles are full. We just moved them from the mix to the bottom of the jar. I still can't fit any more in the jar. I just reallocated within the jar. There's no more room in the jar to bring them in.
So
now,
if Ramsey and a bunch of other customers say, I want 70% of my power to be solar instead of 35, and I'm going to pay a little extra. I want my power to be 70%. Overall, for the utility as a whole, it's not bringing in any more solar marbles. It's just taking solar marbles from someone else.
Correct. Yeah. The only way that I could be able to take more solar marbles is if I underestimated the load growth on our system. And we're using 0.5 to 0.7. So let's say the system grows even more. But we know, look, we're not a big town, and you all know the developments that are coming up around town, whether it's Deco Green, we've got the Mid, we got the Bohemian, we got some other stuff, the Gulfstream opens up. We've kind of taken that stuff into account. We know, unless we start going vertical in the city, which is a big policy issue, we don't see a lot of that happening. It's not like we have a whole bunch of land that's suddenly going to be developed, or a big new mall that's going to open up. There's not a lot. So I don't expect a ton of new growth. Now, electric vehicles could start to move the needle substantially, which I hope they will. We would see that. But I don't expect huge load growth in the future. Maybe we're going to go vertical in some parts of the city, but I don't. You know how the city feels politically. The residents feel about large growth. That's just, I don't see a lot of that happen. But I think 0.5% to 0.75% steady growth is reasonable.
So I don't mean to change the subject a little bit. I don't know if you're complete with that, but I do have another question. With the PCA, say a customer has purchased a significant amount of solar, the remaining balance of the PCA would mean that they have a higher natural gas mix. Is that correct?
Stands to reason, I think, yeah.
Okay, so say we had another situation like we had earlier this year, where natural gas is now higher, and these people all chose to be in the lower, it seemed to me at the time, the lower cost option, but more variable. Now we're going to shift all of that fuel burden onto a smaller portion of the customers.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, that's exactly what would happen.
Correct. Yeah, and that's the hedge that Ramsey's been talking about. That's precisely what's happening. And again, that is why I come back to my point about keep the melting pot. We have the benefit of having a municipal utility. It's wonderful and it's glorious, and it insulates us all from these larger trends. And we should continue to keep that the case, instead of doing pass-through billing to put the added burden of making larger economic decisions now a personal responsibility. That's what I believe.
Yeah, let me add that.
Here.
I'm not looking, and I would not suggest that we finalize the discussion tonight. What I would suggest is that, obviously, we continue to talk, and we, over a series of meetings, just keep thinking about this more. So I don't want you all to be in a position where you have to make your final definitive statement tonight. I want you all to just let it soak in a little bit, think about it a little bit more, pro or con, different ideas, and we keep talking about it for a few months before we, kind of center around a consensus on what to do.
I don't see how giving an individual customer the option to have more of his or her percentage of energy being solar. I don't see how this does anything if it can't bring more solar, if it's not going to bring more solar into the system. I don't see how this accomplishes anything. It just means that somebody else has less solar in their portfolio.
Right.
Amen.
So I think that's one way of looking at it, and I'm trying to sort it all out in my head too. But what I don't want to do is have it come out of here that we somehow did a bad thing by buying all the solar that we bought, because I think we did a good thing, right?
No, the solar's great.
Oh, we didn't do a bad thing by buying the solar.
Too nice.
I'm just saying that this program of individuals picking to have more of their personal energy coming from solar, it doesn't help or do anything. The fact that you got more that stuff from the solar 2 and solar 3 is coming into our town, that's great. Mm-hmm. It's just this program isn't going to bring any more solar. It's not going to, the overall consumption of utility for solar or non-solar isn't going to change from this program.
Now, what would help though is if we do move to storage, then that certainly would help. And because that opens up the nighttime market, right? You can suddenly use that power after dark.
Well, Director,
agreed.
you get to a crazy opportunity there. I mean, this may just be way out in left field, but should we not consider offering people the ability to subscribe to, I don't know if subscribe is the right word, but pay a premium to invest in storage, and then by investing in the storage, they are able to capture solar, some of the economics of the solar that otherwise would have been lost over term?
Now, I think that's a real good idea, actually. You say, okay, let's say, for example, a customer wants 100% solar. And you say, hey, the only way I can get you 100% solar is to add a battery. And here's what your share per megawatt hour or per kilowatt hour would be of the cost of a battery. I haven't looked at that.
Agreed, though, like
math.
I will pay more money to make capital improvements on the grid, but I will not pay more money to potentially screw over my neighbors.
Yeah, exactly
and
right.
that's-
You described the internal market, Mr. Jeffers. You nailed it. Getting back to your original comments, like how do we get beyond this just being an internal market, right? Because if it's an internal market, that's all we're doing is creating a like swaps
And if you and I
market
can
between
pay extra
customers.
for,
Yeah.
if you and I can pay extra for capital improvements for things like storage, then yeah, hell yeah, let's do it. But if we're just going to run like a secondary market where I have to screw over my neighbors by choosing solar and the natural gas spikes, or they get to like screw me over by choosing the cheapest bill at the time, then like, you know, that it's not a good situation for a community. And
what
Lake Worth
effectively-
Local, the Facebook group will look a lot worse.
Yeah, I think what
yeah.
effectively would happen though is if you choose, let's say if gas prices are low and you choose the solar option, the rest of the customers say, well, good thing he took that $45 stuff. We're happy with the $25 stuff that we're getting from gas, right?
But at best, we're
Agreed, but much
speculating
like
against
its physical properties, the price
That's
of
a
gas
dice
is
roll.
highly volatile.
It is.
Right.
It is a dice roll.
At best, we're speculating against each other, or we're opening up a speculation market of sorts, which has consumer benefits and may even have financial benefits over term. But I'm back with Mr. Jeffers 100% on this. If we can figure out a way for offering people if we can figure out a way to offer people the ability to pay premia that correspond to additional investments that lower our overall fuel exposure over term, then we should do that and pass through some of those corresponding benefits back to the people who pay those premium. I think that's the thing to focus on in my book at this point.
Yeah,
so do a
that's
subscription.
Fair. Like let people invest if they want to invest in something that's real, but otherwise, like let's not again just put more personal responsibility on people to decide. Oh yeah, the war in Ukraine, like the natural gas prices, who knows, blah, 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 blah. Like and now we're putting that entire burden on people by presenting this option. And what people will do is they'll choose the cheapest option at the time. And I don't.
So let me try to convert that so it processes in my mind. So what we're saying is we would charge a customer chooses a higher solar blend. And we charge them a premium, and the premium is used to develop storage. Is that what you're suggesting?
I'm saying you buy storage on bond, and then we pay for it.
Who pays for it? The people who select solar, or it's in base rates for everybody?
The people who opt in, maybe a little bit in base rates at a certain degree. Like that's a blend to figure out. Like that's a real conversation. Where how much adds to the base rate, and then how much adds to people who opt in, and then what sort of value do they get out of it? Like that's a whole spreadsheet. That's a simulation. We can do that, but this current thing, I don't know. It just seems like a non-starter. It doesn't seem like it will leave anybody happier than they were.
Yeah,
but a community storage program, if you will, sounds very, very cool. I don't know. I'll leave you with that.
I still don't understand what the benefit would be as a customer with storage.
Lower rates.
But then you're in the same exact boat that you are with purchasing. You're still in the same thing. You're more stable rates. It's not lower rates. It's higher rates, but they're more stable.
For people who opt in, sure. Like paying for the storage up front, absolutely. But the price sensitivity in the future, like just the way inflation's going and everything, it might be more. Like we're building solar fields now, but the FMPA Solar 4 is going to be more expensive to build than 3, even if it's the same capacity, just because of time zero. So it is something. If we can buy it now and build it and then invest in it and have storage that is owned by Lake Worth Power and operated by Lake Worth Power, then that's a good thing.
Wasn't
That
storage
is
part of the
valuable in the
IRP
future.
though, Eric? I mean, sorry, Director Liberty, do we have
Yeah.
storage plan in the IRP? Is like 10 years from now, maybe?
Yeah, I think, I'm not sure if it's as far, I don't remember. It's not as far as 10 years. I want to say 3 to 5. I
Okay.
don't think it was as far as 10, but it's certainly in the IRP.
And
Eric, you got a good idea, but you're going to need critical mass of customers willing to do it for it to be feasible.
And then what
Agreed.
would happen
And
is
that's why-
if the customers then bail out of the solar program, the ultimate cost of the storage then falls onto everybody.
Agreed, but the idea here being that storage ultimately makes everything cheaper for everybody in the
Yeah.
long run. And I think we all know that, but yeah, I understand how that's hard to communicate.
Does it make it cheaper or does it make it more stable?
Cheaper. It lets us consume solar, store it, and then use it later. At night when people want to run their AC, you can
But
be
that's-
using storage power, and the excess that's generated from solar fields during the day, we can store it.
Sure, but that's only if we're in oversupply. If we can store the excess electrons that we're getting from solar. And it sounds like in summer we can take it all, and in winter we can't. So I don't really understand.
I think it
How it
goes
makes
back
it
to what,
cheaper.
I think it goes back to what fossil fuel prices are. It really competes head on with fossil fuel prices.
Absolutely.
So one of the things to keep in mind, as it is now, the solar prices, let's say they're blended in the, prime, I forget the exact numbers. So let's say we're blended at $45 a megawatt hour. That's still probably twice what fossil fuel is going for today. So as this solar starts coming on, our PCA is going to be going up if gas prices stay where they are today. So that's the trade-off that we've made as a city, is we're willing to overpay for solar versus today's natural gas prices. A, because we believe it's the right thing to do, and B, because we also believe it's a hedge against gas prices going even higher, right? So it works for both the capitalists and also the environmentalists, right? It works for
And
both.
agreed. And yeah, we're doing that as a city. And what we're talking about here is potentially letting people do that as individuals. And again, I believe that is a good thing, letting individuals opt into that, as long as it's for capital improvements. I don't believe it's a good thing to do as operational expenditures. If it's just to pay the bills, we shouldn't have a plan for that. The marbles are fixed, and those are bills that we have, and we should not be doing that. But if it's going to improving the Lake Worth grid and improving our own Lake Worth utility and having storage that we can then sell later or just use, then let's go. Like that seems like a great idea.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of goes back to the Ramsey's earlier assumption that he can do virtual net metering, which is kind of a completely different conversation then, right? Because Ramsey would then be taking, let's say, 1,000 kilowatts, right, out of our capacity. Like he will now own it for the next 20 years, unless he opts out, and then we have to put it back into the pile for someone else, and then Ramsey's kicked out, right? Or maybe you can't come back for a year.
Right. And he has 1,000 kilowatt hours, and now we're like expecting an individual to operate as a power company. Like now Ramsey has a power purchase agreement with a power company, and he has to navigate that entire landscape. And most people just aren't trying to deal with that nonsense.
Right, and you could lose money over 20 years, or you could get a return on investment, right? There could be a monthly fixed cost that rises every single year. I mean, I encourage everyone to go look at the FPO website. I'm not trying to say that the Solar Together program they have is awesome or that we should do it, but it kind of gives us something to compare our conversations to, because a lot of these points that have been brought up are in like the about section in the terms. But that's basically giving an end user a piece of our solar field.
Yeah, and
lock it up.
keep in mind, there's a very big, very fundamental difference between the business models of an investor-owned utility and municipal, and it's not necessarily obvious. So the investor-owned utility earns their money by investing capital and collecting the return on invested capital or the ROI or ROE. So their allowable rate of return is typically in the range of 8.5% to 10.5% on invested capital. So their rates are designed to do that. So they are incented to put more capital in the ground. It's not a bad model. It's just a different model than ours, because every dollar of capital that they put in the ground, they're going to get 8.5% to 10.5% return on it in their rates, guaranteed. So they're going to build as much solar as they can because they're going to get a return on invested capital on it, right? So it's not so much about what they charge the customer for it. The more customers they get to say, yes, I want solar, the more solar they get to build, and they get to collect on it. They get rates on it, right? We're not in that
Right.
model. That's a very different model.
I'm here. I completely agree. We are mirroring what a publicly traded company with stock does. NextEra stock, you'd be up 90% if you had invested in it 5 years ago. That's not a good thing. Lake Worth Beach Utility is a municipal utility. Losing money or not being highly profitable is a feature, not a bug. That is what the utility should do. It is here to serve us, and we are here to help figure out how it best does that.
Right.
And
I agree 100%. And I've worked in both models, and I'm not going to say that one is good or the other is bad, because they're both good. It just depends on what you want, right?
I mean, I'll say the investor owned is bad. I'll say that.
I'm not going to say that, because I don't believe it's bad. I think there's horses for courses, and that model works very well. And the municipal model works very well. They're not mutually exclusive, and they work fine. So I would say that our model, though, is to make sure that we produce enough money, a fair return. So customers, in other words, our rates shouldn't be so much lower than all other utilities, than the investor owns, that we're basically giving the product away at the expense of the well-being of the city, because we do want to be able to support the general fund and support the city functions, right?
of course.
So we need to, at the moment, our residential customers, by the way, are getting a great deal versus FPL.
I agree. And I don't know how much you watch or notice, but the other shoe has dropped on that. Because we're managed by the FMPA, our pass through on the power cost adjustment, we ate that immediately. And we saw that in our rates or whatever. Whereas FPL, they got to hold on to that for a year. And so everybody was like, oh no, my power bill. But now FPL, they're doing it. They're dropping that in, that rate increase, and they're making back the money that they had spent, 6 to 9 months ago. And everybody's losing it over that. And it's a lack of understanding and education that leads to that. But again, municipal utilities, all for it.
Yeah, year to date, we're about 5% lower than FPL. We actually track actual FPL bill that a customer got versus an actual bill that the same type of customer would have received. Taxes, all in. The check you wrote to FPL versus the check you wrote to Lake Worth Beach. And year to date, we're over 5% lower. The June bills, this was a customer below around 900 kilowatt hour customer. Their bill is probably $25 to $30 lower.
I believe it. And $25 to $30 on a 900 kilowatt bill, that's like 15%, 20%.
Even last year, we were about 1% lower. If you take your total electric bill for the year at Lake Worth for 2022, and you compare that to what your total bill would have been at FPL, it was about 1% lower in Lake Worth. Now, we got really beat up on social media, but social media doesn't care about facts. But those were the facts. It was cheaper, even though we raised our rates substantially in September of 22. We were, for the year, you would have paid less to Lake Worth Beach than you would to FPL. So I know there are people.
It just, now it's getting even worse. Like FPL, they're paying back what they spent earlier because they're governed by a different set of legislation than we are. As Lake Worth Utilities and a member of the FMPA. So again, it's all good stuff, but just this idea of letting customers decide what sort of power source they want, it seems to defeat the point of having a really good municipal utility. I don't know. It seems to defeat the point of it, where everything we do, we make the best decisions possible, and they're decided by people elected or appointed, and they work out well. And we're trying to now shift that responsibility onto the individuals and let them manage their own, I
So-
guess, like larger economic decisions.
Are
And
you
that-
against net metering then?
I mean, no, that's fine. You
The-
put solar panels on your house and.
Yeah, but
you-
that's an individual making a decision about what they're buying.
They're
But net
choosing to make
metering
a
still-
capital improvement, though. I feel
Right,
like that's
exactly.
consistent with what I've said. They are choosing to make a capital improvement, and I am all for people being able to opt into capital improvements for the grid. But what we're talking about right now is not a capital improvement. It
But-
is some sort of
but-
operational expenditure.
Okay, but doesn't their energy mix change if you're on net metering versus your neighbors that is not?
Yeah, the
I
net.
mean,
metered
only if you're
customer
getting more back
has-
to the grid than you're using.
Yeah, the net metered customer has basically avoided paying their share of the system operations costs. They've elected to make their own energy on top of their home. So they may be paying a little bit more for the total energy, but they're avoiding, the savings are coming by avoiding the utilities fixed costs under the base rate.
Sure, but my argument is that you're allowing an individual to make a decision about where their energy comes from. They have the physical space for it, and they have the funds to
Agreed.
do it.
And they're
then-
choosing to make a capital improvement. They are adding infrastructure to the grid. And I am all
No,
for
they're not adding,
infrastructure to the
they're
grid.
not adding any infrastructure to the grid.
It's after the meter. It's not to the grid.
It doesn't add it, it's not helping the grid, really. The-
Director Liberty, the backstory for this, two questions. Where did this idea come from? Was it from the utility, from the commissioners, or who brought this idea forward, and what was the end goal? And two, is this being done anywhere else in the United States, or has this been done historically with some success?
Let's take it in pieces. It is being done in the United States. It's being done right here in Florida. So subscription rates are being done. So it's not unusual in that regard. I'm trying to think back to the genesis of the idea as a chicken and egg thing. It didn't come directly from this commission. It's something that we've talked about for a number of years. And if I think back, I want to say it was a desire to be able to offer customers an alternative to putting solar on their roof, that they could in fact select a solar option from their own utility for those that could not afford to do it. We didn't block net metering at all. It's the law, we allow it. But for those that could not afford it, this allowed them to have a solar component just for themselves and to feel good about it and to do good. Although I do appreciate David Sims's point that, hey, the net of all of this is you haven't changed the utilities fuel mix. You've just taken some of those marbles for yourself and, and paid for them. But no, it's a very good point. But there's no edict or no construct from the current commission or the prior commission that said you have to do this. This was something that all that we talked to thought it would be a good thing to do to let customers choose.
Can we have that sent to everyone as part of backup for the next meeting as some examples of where this is in place today?
Sure, we can get to that. I know that Orlando.
Also, yeah, in the examples, like maybe I can ask this now. Is any FMPA member doing this, or is this all just not FMPA members? You mentioned it was in Florida, is why I asked.
Yeah, OUC is a member and they're doing it.
Tallahassee's a member and they're doing it.
Yeah.
I think Mount Dora, Little Mount Dora is doing it. There's probably some others.
Is Tallahassee a member
Yes.
of the FMPA? Okay.
Yes.
But are they using their subscription programs to bring on more solar? So are they somehow saying to their ratepayers, hey, do you want to pay a premium? And if you pay a premium, we'll buy the corresponding additional solar.
I don't think so. And I know I don't believe Orlando is, let me put it this way, because ultimately they're looking at their resource plan for the total utility. And they're recognizing that regardless of what customers select in year 1 or year 2, the utility has to backstop it. So they're not, from what I can tell, and I don't know this to be 100% true, but correct me if I'm wrong. I don't see them going out and building extra solar because a handful of customers signed up for it. Because that if those customers move or deselect that option on the next cycle, every other customer is stuck with that bill. So I know that OUC, for example, has decided to not do more solar. They don't see it growing at a certain rate. Other, Jacksonville or Beaches Electric has said no more after solar 3. They don't want any more. So it really depends. We're pretty progressive. We went much further in our commitment than anybody else as a percentage of portfolio that I'm aware of. But ultimately, the utilities have to backstop those contracts. So you can't go out and buy a whole bunch extra because a handful wanted it. Our policymakers, and I agree this was the right thing to do, said, hey, we want to buy this for everybody. It's a part of it's who we are. It defines us.
Then let's just make that us, everybody, and not make people choose.
Well, I really like the feedback that we've gotten from the group tonight. And I don't consider it to be final and definitive unless the group wants to finalize it. But I would say, think about it some more, talk with people, get some more thoughts, and let's meet again and keep kicking it around. Because what I wouldn't want to do, for example, is leave this meeting and go to the commission and say, nah, we're not going to offer, the board doesn't want to offer subscription rate. And I think it would require a lot of thought and explanation. It requires a deep 2-hour discussion by people that are, more knowledgeable of this than the average person in the street, right? So let's keep thinking about it, talking about it, and bat the ideas around it, and then, down the road, in the next couple of months, decide what we want to do.
Yeah, I agree. We weren't given enough backup for this meeting to make any kind of decision tonight.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. And it's intended to be just be familiarized with the concepts. Think about it some more. We'll get you some more information, examples, and then we'll meet again, and we'll keep storming, norming, and forming till we arrive at a conclusion. So, and some of you may shift your opinions, from where you are. Some of you it may strengthen your opinions, but I'm not going to hold you to what you've said tonight per se, and say, oh, you said this, so your vote's in, you're done. No.
Oh, yeah, no. I mean, I don't anticipate my opinion changing that much, but I'm down to think about it. I'm going to talk to people about this. I want to take an anecdotal survey of people who, like they live in Lake Worth and they pay for power. So I want to see what they think. And I got to say, though, I'll try not to inject any of this into the conversation, but I think they're going to choose everybody should have the cheapest bill possible. That is always the opinion of everybody I've ever talked to about any sort of power complaint, is everybody should have the cheapest bill possible. And when it comes down to that, we're just kind of looking at keep the melting pot. And that's my piece. That's the way I feel about it right now.
That's exactly. I already did this anecdotal survey when we tried going around for our carbon footprint, right? We want to get our carbon footprint to 0, and everyone says, I don't care how we get there, just make sure my bill is low.
Right? Yeah.
But there were some like, oh yeah, I appreciate solar, but is it going to cost more? Like, yeah. I'm like, oh, then maybe that's not such a good idea. So like, but yeah, everyone's always focusing on the economics of, day to day. We have a lot of people in the city on fixed incomes. They're not really happy about, things going up and down like the PCA already. But yeah, I do believe that this does require more thought, more information.
Agreed.
With feedback, I can offer, you may have heard me use a statistic before, but in August of 2017, we were ranked 24th in the state for our residential rate for the 1,000 kilowatt-hour customer, using 12-month rolling averages. We were 24th.
Out of like what, like 100?
No, out of 38.
Oh.
The combination of the municipals and investor owns was about 38. That does not count the co-ops. Co-ops are very, very different. They're not tracked. But we were ranked 24th. 5 years later, August of 2022, we dropped to 5th. We were ranked number 5. Now we've crept upwards since then because everybody's fuel adjustments started going crazy because of the price spike. And we're going to be coming down substantially once the June reports are out, because we will have had our May and June rate decreases, and we hopefully, have another rate decrease later in the year. I hope.
Again, I'm not familiar with the accounting, but like the way Lake Worth Utilities runs is it's much more of a pass through than other utilities who FPL, they kind of absorbed that for a minute and now they're paying it back. The legislation around the way they can set rates is far different than public utilities.
Well, the FPL's fuel adjustments are typically done annually, and they're done with a 12-month analysis. However, the rate increase or the cost increases in 2022, they built up an imbalance of about 1.8 billion, is my understanding. I don't think, Craig, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it was about 1.8 billion.
You're probably right.
And
sounds like a lot.
And they opted to spread the recovery of that over 23 months instead of 12 months. That's how big the number got. So their customers are really, they're going to be stuck with higher rates for quite some time. Now, their 2023 number, so that 1.8 billion was just their under recovery from prior years, if I remember the number correctly. So please don't quote me on it, but I think it was 1.8 billion.
Sounds right to me.
So their 2023 number is their estimate, their forecast. They have now reduced it twice, I think, and they're talking about a third reduction, I think, because their 2023 forecast was higher than what's coming in actuals. You know, Brian mentioned that we're in the mid to low twos right now. I think none of us believed that we would see those numbers in 23, but in fact we are. And the futures markets are showing pretty much gas under $3 through the October, November timeframe. So, you know, cheering for the futures. But I've said this in meetings before, though, some of the precursors to what happened last year are still in place in the market. And there's even more LNG coming online, leaving the country. So fortunately, we had a warm winter. There's more gas in storage, but you know, the war is still on. And by August, September, October, I think you'll start to see prices go up again, thinking that, okay, what's going to happen for the winter, and even more LNG leaving the country. The price pressures for LNG to go to Europe remain in place, Europe and Asia.
Yeah. And to that point, it just sure seems like we should spread the benefit of Lake Worth deciding to be all in on solar across everybody who gets to live here, instead of leaving that up to individuals' decisions. And again, that's my point.
Well, let's just say that we gave everyone the option to choose, and we wanted to do it next month. We came up with a plan, said this is what we want. Here's all the specs for everything. Go. How long will it take for the billing system to be fixed or updated or upgraded or whatever in order to account for anything like this?
I'm told by IT that our current billing system can do it. I'm doubtful that it can do it, but IT says it can. A new billing system is probably close to 2 years away, I'm told.
So we're on Paymentus now. What's the new one?
No, the Paymentus is the processing platform for credit card payments only. The city's billing system is in our legacy ERP, which is called Naviline, Nivine, Naviline. And Naviline is a Central Square product, and we're going to be migrating over likely to a product by a company called Milsoft, Milsoft, and their billing system.
Okay.
Which is different, of course, than the bill printing company. We just, in early 22 or sometime, maybe it's 21, we rolled out a new bill print format. So the bill look different.
And does any of these discussions, does that kind of cross over or conflict with anything we discussed in the past about a prepay model? Or did that concept just get tossed out?
No, prepay, I don't think this would affect prepay. The prepay concept has been waiting for other things to fall into place in the city. One is a building system. The other some of the nagging problems we'd had with the AMI system, for example, would affect prepay of the AMI system isn't working properly, because we do have a number of the AMI meters that are not working properly. That doesn't, I should clarify that they're not communicating on a regular basis. They are measuring properly. So we can get manual reads from them, but they're not communicating.
So in 2 years' time, if we made a decision about this solar PCA versus keeping it melting pot, whatever, and the billing is in place, prepaid goes online, everything just falls into place. The new billing system is pretty much all we're waiting. That's the bottleneck here, right?
I think so. I'm very nervous about this current billing system being able to accommodate changes. So one of, you look behind the curtain, there are only a couple of people in the city that really understand the billing system. It's a little scary. And the system is not well supported anymore by that company. So
Sounds like a lot of good reason to not rock the boat further, but okay.
in that billing system, we could possibly do it, but I'm more comfortable with a new billing system where there's a much more robust marketplace and support system likely in the marketplace. The new billing system also is part of an overall integration that drives a lot of technology in the customer relationship.
What's the new billing system? It's MillSoft, is that what you said?
Yeah, MillSoft. So MillSoft, it involves a new customer information system. It ties into our outage management system, and it ties.
Is that what the new map is for the outages?
That's a part of it. That's partly driven by MillSoft. Yep. Yep.
It's a nice map.
Now,
Yeah.
you said that
MillSoft integrates our geographic information system, our GIS system, together with Tantalus, or the AMI system, and our SCADA system. And I could argue it uses an element of artificial intelligence, because when it sees an outage, so an outage will show up in a few places. It'll show up immediately on the AMI, assuming that AMI meter is talking to us. It may show up in SCADA, and it may show up by a customer calling us and reporting an outage. Who's
our SCADA vendor? Is that Johnson or somebody else?
No, VT SCADA.
Okay.
And the outage management system looks across those platforms, quickly identifies the outage, and quickly deduces the common denominator in all the outages. So let's say Matt's house has an outage, but only Matt's house shows up on the outage system. It'll say the problem is probably at Matt's house. Trouble truck crews go directly to Matt's house. But if Matt's house lights up and 5 or 6 houses around him light up, the system will say, based on what we know about Matt's meter, it's tied to this specific secondary on the distribution system, which, and all these other homes, they have in common, that transformer, that specific pole top or pad mount transformer, go there. That's likely what the problem is. If it picks up a group of 30 or 40 in a cluster, it quickly says, it's probably not a problem at the service line for 2 houses or 1 transformer. It's probably the fuse or the switch at the end of that block. Go there. So it quickly routes people there. And then what the system will do, if it's tied into the call system, the customer information system, it would quickly send an outbound message to those affected customers that say, A, we know you have an outage, and B, we're working on it, and this is your expected restoration time. So the goal is to beat you to the phone, so you don't call us. Because when you call us, it's going to cost us a minimum of $2.50 to handle the call. If you get to a live operator, at best, it's going to clog our phone system up with a whole bunch of inbound calls, right? So we want to get that outage message to you right away. And the billing system is all a part of that new customer information system. It's all linked in there together. It's pretty cool. We've begun to roll out some of it. We have the outage management system up and running. We have a new SCADA system up and running. We have a new GIS that we've rolled out, which has to be updated as we do construction. We have a
is that Esri or the GIS system, like ESRI?
No, we went to a MillSoft GIS. Yeah, I'm familiar with Esri.
Okay.
Went to the previous one, I believe, was an Esri system. I was involved with this for a few million customers in my prior job. But we also have updated what we call the the IVR, the voice recognition system on the telephone. So if you call in, you're going to go through a menu before you get to a live operator. And many of the questions would be answered electronically or by machine, routing you through a tree before you get to a live operator. If you need to get to a live operator, you will. And our call wait times have gone down dramatically. Our call wait times are typically now, for an outage call, somebody calling to report an outage is typically in the range of 1 to 2 minutes wait time before you get a live voice. But you can report that outage without talking to the live voice just by using prompts on the phone. For a customer service call, those calls are around $5 and change, $5.50. Those call wait times are generally in the 2-minute range. They've come down from the 15 to 20-minute range. So the IVR is helping a lot. But what's key to the next step is to get to you before you call us. Call you and tell you, A, we know you have an outage. B, we're working on it. C, this is how long we think it'll be. Now, if you call us and you go through the tree, it confirms who you are, ties that phone number to you, which then updates our system, and it gives you the option to get a call back. In the future, you'll get text messages and emails calling you back. So there's a bunch of different things that are coming with the new next round of the evolution of MuleSoft. So we really crossed the threshold here in technology.
Yeah,
Okay,
I'm responsible for that digression, but I super appreciate it. Thank you. Ryan, please get us back on track.
yeah, I was getting there. I was trying to circle back to my original question. Long way of asking it. You got kind of detoured here, but basically, you said that the storage may be coming online within time frame of 3 to 5 years, correct?
That's my vague recollection. I have to go back and reread the IRP, and that would be when we think it would be economic. That we of course have to make the decision to buy it. But that's what I think I can recheck the IRP. The IRP is also on the website. It's on the Citizen Don't Energy website.
Okay, so the billing is going to be maybe 2 years out. The storage could be 3 to 5 years out. And the decisions we make as a board, we probably have to think that we are going to have storage soon, within like the next 5 years.
That's my hope. We've seen some storage models in the state. Storage is happening already in the state. Florida Power & Light's doing storage, but they've been guaranteed that return on invested capital, right? So it's in customer rates. It's not yet economic, but they've been allowed to build it and put it in their rates and get their return on investment, as long as they build it below a certain price. But FMPA studied storage very closely for Key West. A pretty compelling business model because it would help avoid running fossil fuel units at the end of that transmission line to support the territory. And they were also concerned about becoming transmission constrained. So they would need to bring energy in at night and store it to help meet summer daytime peaks. That was a pretty extensive study and it was not economic. And that study was done about a year ago, year and a half ago. It was not yet economic, but they're watching prices to see when that will happen.
Yeah, because I just hate to have this board go through this exercise, come up with a really awesome plan, and then our billing system not be able to support it. And someone like Joel Rutsky was keeping tabs of data on Excel spreadsheets for everybody. You know, definitely want to have our billing software, modernized.
Well, we're told that the existing billing software has been now modified so that he will not need to do the net metering billing manually anymore. We're told that it will now work. So this next cycle will be done by machine. Of course, he'll have to review it to make sure it was correct, but we're told that he will not have to do it manually again.
All right. It seems like we're coming to a conclusion here. Does anyone have any other thoughts or questions on this one topic?
I did. I remember, I mean, this is the way back. I don't know if anything came of it. We were talking about time of use at one point as well. Or is that a figment of my imagination? This is probably going back 2 or 3 years.
Yeah, it's been talked about. I believe we currently have a time of use rate, if I'm not mistaken, and Craig knows.
I think you have a time of use rate. I don't know if anybody's on it. I don't think anybody's on it.
Nobody has selected it. The interesting thing is, if you do a lot of research, and Ramsey may have seen this too, but time of use rates can actually work against you in a decarbonization. If we're oversubscribed to solar, which we certainly are, we'd be better off incenting more daytime use.
That was where I was going to go with this.
Yep.
So, I mean, is there a potential to have a time of use where it reflects when we're actually in high solar production versus, kind of the traditional model? I mean, I know it increases our peak load, but that was my next question. So.
Yeah, it would increase our peak load, but it will allow us to use up those solar megawatt hours. So ideally, we'd have vehicle charging during the day by building more charging stations. And if you think about it, flowing those excess solar megawatt hours into vehicles. And ironically, we do watch our electric use on our charging stations that we have throughout the city. And it's higher during the winter months than it is during the summer months. And I think that a big part of it, my own personal conclusion, is the snowbirds on the barrier island and in the area, recognizing that our electric rates are cheaper than charging in FPL territory. So they're coming to Lake Worth Beach to charge their EVs, which is, I think, really cool. Because while they're here charging, they're enjoying the downtown, they're enjoying the beach, they're probably spending dollars supporting merchants, they're playing golf, they're getting the greens fees. So it's pretty cool. But if we look at the data, we're seeing more use during the winter months, and I think it's snowbirds. And there's actually,
and that comes back to my whole point. Just again, all of Lake Worth Power should always be the cheapest possible thing for everybody, uniformly. And again, like that it's a draw, just like you said. It's an attraction. It's everything that's great. But I do wonder about that though. Why is it higher in the winter?
We
could just be snowbirds, but yeah.
Yeah, the system allows us, if I remember correctly, to determine what state they may have come from. I have to take a look at that again. So the company that services that and processes the billing for us is the company that sells the chargers.
Electrify America?
No, it's not Electrify America. It's ChargePoint.
Okay.
Yeah, but very similar model. They would have the credit card records. They, in theory, could tell us the state of origin of the vehicle that charged.
You guys might have the VIN too. You could always just run the VIN and then see what state it's registered to.
We only have I don't think we have the VIN. The only way that we would have that would be through the license plate that they paid for parking at the beach. But the J Street lot and the golf course lot, we don't have license plate numbers.
Okay, well, like most electric chargers, maybe the company's not forwarding it to the utility, but like they can read the VIN over the charger.
They probably can, and we'd have to look at the data set to see what's buried in there. We have a huge data set that comes from it, a ton of information.
Yeah, there might be some really cool stuff in there. Yeah, that's neat.
Yeah.
Sounds like a fun problem.
Yeah, we need an analyst to take a look at it and drill down inside that data to see where they came from. But my gut says that it's snowbirds from out of state.
Yeah, and who knows, within the next 20 years, we could have electric boats and electric boat charging stations.
Yeah, I'm all for that stuff. I'm big on going.
There's going to be an electric ferry that's like the seaplane, but it uses the ground effect and flies over the water, and it's going to go to the Bahamas within a couple of years, if you believe what people are saying. Yeah, okay, neat.
There's a lot of talk at ports, for example, for electrifying the ports and then having these offshore mooring buoys where a ship can pick up a mooring, not drop an anchor, but pick up a mooring and have electric plug-in so they could displace the light oil that they're burning in their generators to keep the ship alive.
I wouldn't want to be the bill collector on the people who park in the Intracoastal to do that, but it seems like a good model.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I'd be happy with electric to see the freebie golf carts running around town charging electric. I think that would be really cool, and I think people would use them.
Absolutely.
Yeah, there was
Director, there are a ton of people talking about that right now.
Mhm.
Have you considered offering a rate subsidy of some kind to that company? Or is there some rate, if not a rate subsidy, let me revise that. Is there a rate structure that might be conducive to or capital investments we could make through a subscription model. I mean, is there anything the utility could do to help make that happen? Because I know it's really something, frankly, we need and a lot of people are working on.
Yeah, I happened to be talking with fellow directors last night, outside the commission meeting. So that's when I first became aware there was actually somebody talking about it. I haven't seen the numbers, but I would not be opposed to, a discussion of how could the electric utility help make that happen? I don't think that a charging rate would be the way to do it. It might be in the form of, helping on the purchase of the vehicle somehow, or, I'm not sure how to do it, but our charging rate, I'll give you an example of what's happened right now. An interesting phone call came in with respect to the Bohemian. The Bohemian, you're all familiar with the Bohemian, right? The
Yes.
residential development.
Yes.
So,
Yeah, it's
On
really
Lake
big. I
Avenue.
can see it
Yep.
from my backyard.
All right, so in that parking garage on the ground floor, we have city-owned chargers for public charging. And we charge basically our residential rate for charging. On the upper floors of the parking deck, the developer was required to put in chargers. That's part of our code. You build a certain size development, you have to have a certain number of vehicle chargers, which is good. The rate, it was discovered that the rate they're charging to use the chargers upstairs is substantially higher than the rate that the city's charging downstairs. That's because the recovery of the cost of capital for vehicle chargers is in our base rates. Whereas the developer is now trying to recover the cost of the chargers they put in the building, I suspect. They're trying to recover that from their tenants who are charging their vehicles.
Yeah, plus the added grift for the developer. Yeah. But again, that comes back to my earlier point of just that's why we're a municipal utility and that's why it's wonderful.
Yeah. So I actually threw some ideas around, and it wasn't a formal forum of any type with the other directors, but say, gee, we charge golf carts at the golf course. These things are basically golf carts. We could set a meter for them, a charging station, and they could charge their golf carts for the freebie right there and pay the regular city rate, which is a pretty attractive rate. Then if they need some seed money to get started, that might be a policy discussion. I know they sell advertising as a part of their business model on those golf carts. The electric utility could sell an advertise or buy an ad space on those as well, which will help drive the model and promote the utility. The CRA could promote the CRA's functions, or Parks and Recreation, or the street painting festival, all kinds of things. So there's a lot of different ideas, but we haven't had a forum to really kick it all around and say what makes sense. But the net effect is that we have a fleet of these things running around. That would be good.
I'm all for it.
I think it would
believe
be,
that would be a much better use of the utilities surplus and profit rather than just giving it straight back to the city's general fund. If you had a little bit of latitude to decide what to do with it in order to further improve things, I think that would be great.
yeah, I think there's a value there to it. If you want to go out downtown, you live anywhere in the city, you call the freeway, you go downtown, you have cocktails, you don't have to worry about a DUI, you don't have to worry about parking. You just pay, tip the driver in the freebie a few bucks, and then you go home at night. And you didn't have to take your car, right? Didn't crowd the downtown. And they're all charging instead of buying gas at the gas station. They're all charging.
And eventually they'll be AI powered and driven. You don't have to tip anybody.
Yeah.
Oh, well, I won't ride in one then.
I think it works really well up and down the the east side of the city. East of 95. I think it'd be pretty cool stuff. But I'd like to be involved in discussion.
Hopefully we'll get there.
Yep.
All right, well, I think we kind of run out of time. It's pushing 8:30.
Yep.
We should wind it down. Any last second questions before we move on to board liaison comments?
My only question is just, so we're just supposed to think about the whole plan and everything, and then we're going to come back and meet about it later and make a decision.
And
Yeah,
reach out
Or
to
rather,
community,
a
too.
recommendation to the commission.
Yeah, and reach out. I'm not making a commitment yet on when to bring it back to commission until you all batted it around for a meeting or two, a couple more meetings, and you feel comfortable making a statement about it. So
Okay. Understood. Thank you.
All right, moving on to board comments. I just want to say special thank you to Mr. Portilla for volunteering to read off our annual report in front of the commission on May 30th. Thank you very much. I know we didn't meet a lot to have a lot of meat and potato, 10-minute worth of presentation, but you did a good job.
Thank you.
I'd like to second.
And I'll add to that, Matt Portillo also sat on the selection committee evaluating the in-community solar projects. So thank you, Matt, for taking your personal time from your work days to go and do that. We do appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, anyone else have any comments? Anything like to share? That's kind of just in general. No.
Yesterday was or not yesterday, but a couple days ago was a really bad thunderstorm, and my power went out for like 10 minutes and then it came right back, and I was really happy with that. That's it.
Yeah, I know
It was
quick.
it was much better than like 6 years ago when I first moved to Lake Worth. Like I've seen the improvement. It's been wonderful, and that's it. That's my only comment.
I'm just getting used to the new map, and with all the reds and the oranges and the numbers, it seems to be very accurate. But it's like one person over here on the west side is out, but 450 people on the east side are out. Like that must not be related, right? That's different.
How do we access that?
It's on the
website.
through
It's on the
city
websites.
Okay.
Yeah, the city website, go to the utility page and it'll be an access to the map. So what was different, what we've accomplished now is what would not have been possible 5 or 6 years ago. So let's say Sunday was a big one, right? We had outages on Saturday because of thunderstorms.
Yeah, it was Sunday. That's what I'm talking about here.
Yeah, so Sunday was actually a residual effect of what happened on Saturday. We took a lightning strike, and looking at the actual damaged components, we took a lightning strike near the intersection of 2nd Avenue South and South B. And
That's my house.
that blew apart or melted through partially, we believe it partially melted the conductor and on Saturday. On Sunday, a blue sky day, it started out as a cool morning and then it got sunny in the afternoon and a little bit of some rain showers, humidity went up, and then the temperature went way up and the load built. And the rest of that conductor then burned through and opened that up, and it dumped a number of substations downstream of that. So what was different is that in prior years, everybody would have been out for hours while we made that repair. What's different now is we have much more ability because we've strengthened the system and done so much investment that we can switch around and get alternate paths going. So while you still have an outage, the duration of the outage is decreased dramatically. So, and as we continue to make more investments, you heard me say switch. So we dispatch crews to go open switches and close switches manually from bucket trucks. In the future, more of those will be automated switches, what we call reclosers, which will operate via radio signal from the control room. So the system operator will be opening and closing switches and rerouting power without having to roll a truck. But the big thing is to know that if we take a circuit that has 2,000 customers on it, and we move it over to another circuit that already has 2,000 customers on it, that circuit will take 5,000 customers. And that's the type of thing we've been working to improve by converting from 4 kV to 26 kV, upgrading the infrastructure, rebuilding substations, adding more interconnections and reclosers and switches, and making sure that those things work. So we feel bad that there was an outage, but we look at it with some consolation and say, wow, it's much less of an outage than it would have been a few years ago. And it's going to get much less in the future.
Everything you just said sounds amazing. And if I could choose on my bill to do more of that, I would do that. But choosing marbles, not so much. And that's it. I'm done talking.
No, your bills already include, and we're going to be doing more rounds of capital investment, bond money, not for another couple of years or so, I think. But your bills are already carrying 88 million, 85 to 90 million dollars in that range of capital investment under what we call a Series 2020 bond and Series 2022 bond. Our next bond effort might be in 2025 to raise probably another $40 million or so to keep going. So we want to make sure we keep going, use the money up that we have now before we go ask for more money.
I had a question about, I'm not sure if it was brought up on your update on May 30th. What's the current progress status of the second tie line?
Very good point. Contractor mobilized for the tie line portion. They're mobilizing on Monday. All the permits are in hand. There is a contractor on the site today moving some of the distribution infrastructure underground, which is a part of the overall project, but the official start is going to be Monday of next week.
Like breaking ground or? just
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, they'll mobilize trailers. Much of the materials over here. The steel is here, transformers are here, breakers, much of that stuff is already here. The permitting effort took about 6 months longer than we expected because of issues with the county, things that the county wanted done to the site in order for us to, have all the permits that we needed. And so I don't know that they'll actually turn a shovel on Monday, but I know the contractors mobilizing to the site. Was about 2 months of civil construction to be done before the steel starts going up.
All right.
Sounds like good news.
It's fantastic news.
It's finally happening.
Yep, I was told it wouldn't happen, and it's in fact happening.
Good stuff.
And
Yeah, just in time for hurricane season. We'll get there.
well, yeah, it won't be commercial till well after the first of the year, but it's underway.
All right, Director Liberty, do you have any extra comments that you had prepared for today, or was everything covered?
No, that was it. I was thinking I was thinking it was getting late. I wouldn't touch on outages, but since it came up, I talked about that. But we're things are progressing well. It takes a long time to make infrastructure plans and make them happen. Things that we talked about in 2017 and 2018 when I first got here. The public is starting to see real tangible evidence, new substations, new poles, much better reliability. Doesn't mean we won't have outages, but we're going to have fewer and they're going to be shorter. And we're chugging along. It's a long process. And we have many years of construction ahead of us to get to the FPL standard, which is where we all want to be, minus what they charge.
Okay. And when do you think our next meeting would be for this this topic?
I would say the earliest would be a month, but I'm trying to take the week of 4th of July off, so it may not be that week. It might have to be the week after that. But I want to give you all some time to think about this, unless you want to meet sooner than that. But that's going to be pretty tight to fit it in.
So possibly July 12th is what you're thinking?
Thinking, yeah.
Okay.
That sounds good to me.
Well, I'll bounce some more dates off as I look at the calendar.
Okay. All right, great. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All right, thank you, everyone. And see you in July.
Thank you, everybody.